The story of AC/DC began in November 1973 in Sydney, Australia, when two Scottish-born brothers, Malcolm and Angus Young, decided to form their own band. Music ran deep in the Young family. Nearly every member could sing or play an instrument, and many harbored dreams of performing on stage. Their older brother George had already made some headway in the music world, inviting Malcolm and Angus to play in his band, the Marcus Hook Roll Band. But that collaboration didn't stick. So Malcolm and Angus teamed up with drummer Colin Burgess from the Master's Apprentices, bassist Larry Van Crate, and vocalist Dave Evans to form a new group. The name AC/DC came from their sister Margaret, who spotted the letters on her sewing machine's power adapter. It stood for Alternating Current Direct Current, and the brothers thought it perfectly captured the raw energy and high voltage punch of their music. Their first gig was on New Year's Eve 1973 at Sydney's Checkers nightclub. While the Australian music scene was heavy with glam rock and mainstream pop at the time, AC/DC carved out their own identity with gritty guitar riffs, bluesy rock and roll, and electrifying live shows. From the start, they also focused on visual branding. Angus experimented with various stage costumes, from a gorilla to Zorro. But it was Margaret again who suggested the now iconic schoolboy uniform, which debuted in April 1974. That same year, they released their first single, Can I Sit Next to You, Girl? It wasn't a hit, but it opened doors and revealed cracks in the lineup. Burgess was dismissed for heavy drinking, replaced briefly by Peter Clack, and Van Crete was swapped out for Robbie Bailey. Soon, Dave Evans was also out. Malcolm and Angus felt his voice didn't suit their evolving sound. He was replaced by Bon Scott, a gritty, charismatic frontman with songwriting chops and a rebellious edge. With Scott, they recorded their debut album, High Voltage, released in 1975 in Australia and New Zealand. But the lineup wasn't quite set. Neither Bailey nor Clack made the final cut. They were replaced by drummer Phil Rudd and bassist Mark Evans. This finalized lineup recorded the follow-up album TNT, which was far more successful and cemented AC/DC's local stardom. That same year, the band signed an international deal with Atlantic Records, and the long march to global rock domination began. AC/DC's first internationally released album came out in May 1976, a reworked compilation of tracks from their earlier Australian releases, High Voltage and TNT. Also titled High Voltage, the album marked their debut on Atlantic Records and eventually sold over 3 million copies in the US by 2005. The selection leaned heavily on material from TNT, with only 2 songs taken from the original High Voltage LP. One standout track was It's a Long Way to the Top, If You Want to Rock and Roll. Not just a song, but a defiant anthem that laid bare the brutal reality of life as a rock musician. From the very first lines, Bon Scott made it clear. This wasn't about glamour or glory, but about paying dues in sweat, grit, and rejection. The track's most iconic feature? Bagpipes, surging in mid-song like a war cry. It was Bon's idea. Having once played drums in a pipe band, he decided to give the bagpipes a go, paying tribute to the Young brothers' Scottish roots, and lending the song a rugged, rebellious grandeur. Later that year, on September 20th, 1976, AC/DC released Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, their third album in Australia and second in Europe. But Atlantic Records had serious doubts. They disliked the raw production and Bon Scott's snarling vocal delivery, refusing to release the album in the US and even threatening to drop the band entirely. The rejection was a major blow, but instead of retreating, AC/DC roared back. In 1977, they released Let There Be Rock, a furious response that doubled down on everything the band stood for: heavy riffs, no-nonsense songwriting, and pure sonic power. It was this album that introduced AC/DC's now iconic lightning bolt logo. At a time when many rock bands were flirting with disco, punk, or prog, AC/DC stuck to their guns. No gimmicks, just overdriven guitars and a rhythm section that hit like a freight train. Atlantic may have doubted their sound, but as long as the record sold, the label gave them room to run. That same year, after touring with Black Sabbath and Rainbow, bassist Mark Evans was fired. The official reason was creative differences, though Evans later admitted he simply wasn't the right fit for the band's evolving sound. His replacement was Cliff Williams, a seasoned musician who had played in UK bands Home and Bandit. After watching AC/DC perform on Top of the Pops, he reached out, and by May 1977, he was in. With this solidified lineup, the band recorded Powerage in 1978, setting the stage for their global breakthrough. AC/DC's true breakthrough came in 1979 with the release of Highway to Hell. The album marked a turning point, not just in the band's sound, but in their global recognition. Much of the credit goes to producer Mutt Lange, whose meticulous approach helped sharpen their raw energy into something more focused and anthemic. Under his direction, the lyrics shifted from cheeky and playful to deeper, more resonant rock themes. Backing vocals became tighter, arrangements more precise, but the essence of AC/DC remained untouched. Thunderous riffs, pounding rhythms, and unapologetic swagger. The title track, Highway to Hell, became a generational anthem. It wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of freedom. It spoke to everyone who had ever chosen the wild road, the dangerous path, the life outside the lines. We're not for everyone, AC/DC seemed to say, but we're real. In a world full of pretense, they offered pure, unfiltered rebellion. But with the triumph came tragedy. Just months after the album's release, frontman Bon Scott died of acute alcohol poisoning in February 1980. His death sent shockwaves through the band and the rock world. Fans and critics alike began to interpret Highway to Hell as a haunting farewell, a prelude to the end. It wasn't a sorrowful goodbye, it was Bon's final roar, loud and defiant to the very end. For a moment, the band's future hung in the balance. The loss devastated Malcolm and Angus Young, who had shared a deep creative bond with Scott. It seemed impossible to move forward without him, but it was Bon's own family who urged the band to carry on, believing he would have wanted the music to live. The search for a new frontman began. Eventually, they found Brian Johnson, former lead singer of the British band Geordie, a name Bon himself had once praised in a conversation with Angus. On April 1st, 1980, Brian Johnson was officially introduced as AC/DC's new vocalist. And with him, the band prepared to rise again, louder, stronger, and more determined than ever. With Brian Johnson now at the mic, AC/DC entered the studio in the spring of 1980 to record what would become one of the most iconic rock albums of all time, Back in Black. They chose the Bahamas as their recording location, but the sessions were anything but serene. Tropical storms frequently cut power and disrupted recording, and that chaos made its way into the album's sound, most notably in the ominous bell tolls that open Hell's Bells. The album's all-black cover served as a solemn tribute to Bon Scott, but the music inside roared with life and defiance. Back in Black silenced all doubts about the band's future. It soared to number 4 in the US and debuted at number 1 in the UK. In a historic moment, 3 of AC/DC's earlier albums also re-entered the UK charts, making them the first band since the Beatles to have 4 albums simultaneously in the top 100. But Back in Black wasn't the peak. It was the beginning of a new era. On November 23, 1981, the band released For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, their first US number 1 album, a feat they wouldn't repeat for another 20 years. Yet with success came internal strain. Drummer Phil Rudd, increasingly plagued by substance abuse and tensions with Malcolm Young, recorded his parts for the album, but soon departed under murky circumstances. In May 1983, 19-year-old Simon Wright stepped in as his replacement. That same year, the band released Flick of the Switch, a raw, stripped-down album that marked their first major commercial stumble. Part of the reason? They had parted ways with producer Mutt Lange, whose guidance had been instrumental in shaping their sound. The decline continued with Fly on the Wall, 1985, and Blow Up Your Video, 1988, both of which were met with lukewarm reviews and fading interest from mainstream audiences. Still, AC/DC refused to fade into the background. Their live shows continued to sell out, proving that their thunderous sound still had a home on stage, even if radio had moved on. Then came the resurgence. In 1990, AC/DC unleashed the Razor's Edge, a hard-hitting return to form that electrified fans and critics alike. The album featured Thunderstruck, one of their most recognizable anthems, anchored by Angus Young's blistering hypnotic guitar intro. Producer Bruce Fairbairn, known for his work with Aerosmith and Bon Jovi, helped the band modernize without losing their identity. Chris Slade joined on drums, bringing precision and renewed aggression to the rhythm section. AC/DC spent the early 90s touring the world, filling stadiums with fans both old and new. In 1995, they released Ballbreaker, marking the long-awaited return of Phil Rudd to the drum kit. This time, the album was produced by Rick Rubin, and the band leaned back into a minimalist, heavy blues rock sound that felt both classic and revitalized. In 1997, the band reissued their entire back catalog in remastered form, introducing a new generation to the raw power of their 70s and 80s work. By the end of the decade, AC/DC had solidified their place not just as rock legends, but as a living institution. They had no chart-topping radio singles, but they didn't need them. They had something stronger, full arenas, global respect, and a fan base that was only growing. In the 2000s, AC/DC proved that age is no barrier to rock and roll. The decade kicked off with Stiff Upper Lip in 2000, produced by George Young, Angus and Malcolm's older brother. The album saw a return to the band's bluesy roots and hit #1 in 12 countries. For the next 8 years, the band remained quiet on the new music front, focusing instead on reissuing their catalog and releasing documentary content that celebrated their legacy. Then, in 2008, AC/DC came roaring back with Black Ice, produced by Brendan O'Brien. It topped charts in 29 countries, including the US, and became one of the best-selling rock albums of the decade. The Black Ice World Tour pulled in over $440 million, making it the third highest-grossing tour in history, a staggering feat for a band nearly 4 decades into their career. But the 2010 S brought turbulence. In 2014, Malcolm Young was forced to retire due to dementia. His place was taken by his nephew, Stevie Young, who had the same raw rhythm and no-nonsense playing style. That same year, Phil Rudd faced serious legal issues and was replaced once again by Chris Slade. In 2016, frontman Brian Johnson was forced to leave mid-tour due to severe hearing loss. His replacement? None other than Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses, a surprise move that kept the tour alive. Then, in 2017, the band was hit with another devastating blow. Malcolm Young passed away. Yet, even in the face of loss, AC/DC endured. In 2020, the band reunited with Brian Johnson, Cliff Williams, Phil Rudd, Stevie Young, and of course, Angus. The resulting album, Power Up, was a thunderous tribute to Malcolm, and a reminder that the band's spirit was unbreakable. It debuted at #1 in the US, UK, and Australia, proving that their fire still burned as hot as ever. In 2023, AC/DC returned to the stage for a rare and powerful performance at the Power Trip Festival in California. Decades later, they were still loud, still proud, and still electrifying. AC/DC is more than a band. They're a symbol of resilience. They've weathered the loss of a frontman, the illness of a founder, court battles, health scares, and the slow fade of a changing music industry. And every time, they've come back swinging. Their formula is deceptively simple, crushing riffs, driving rhythms, and zero compromise. AC/DC is raw, honest, and loud to the very last chord. And as they've shouted for decades, for those about to rock, we salute you.